Picture this. The sun has just begun to kiss the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting a soft, golden glow over a sprawling estate. Mist hangs in the valleys, and the world is still, hushed in the quiet anticipation of a new day, here at Monticello. Long before the business of a nation begins, a tall, red-haired figure is already at his desk. The air is filled with the scent of old paper, leather-bound books, and freshly brewed coffee. This isn't the statesman, the president, or the revolutionary you know from history books. This is Thomas Jefferson, the man of letters, a gentle architect building worlds with words. Before he was a founding father, he was a devoted reader. Before he drafted declarations, he composed heartfelt letters. His mornings were a sacred ritual. Rising before dawn, he would plunge his feet into a basin of cold water. Habit, he believed, sharpened the mind. Then, surrounded by his vast library, one of the greatest personal collections of its time, he would sit down to write. The only sounds were the scratching of his quill pen against paper and the ticking of the great clock in the hall, a clock he designed himself. This was his sanctuary. His desk, a marvel of his own invention, allowed him to read and write simultaneously, with a rotating bookstand and multiple surfaces for his projects. Here, he wasn't just managing political affairs. He was corresponding with scientists, philosophers, and artists across the globe. He was meticulously recording weather patterns, noting the first bloom of a spring flower in his garden, and drafting designs for new inventions. His pen was not just a tool for politics. It was an extension of his boundless curiosity. Eonce Doble wrote, "I cannot live without books." And he meant it. His library was the heart of his home and his mind. He read in Greek, Latin, French, Italian, and Spanish. He devoured texts on architecture, agriculture, science, music, and law. For Jefferson, knowledge wasn't something to be hoarded. It was something to be cultivated and shared, like the seeds he so carefully planted in his gardens. Every book was a conversation with the past, a window into another world, a building block for the future he envisioned. His letters offer the most intimate glimpse into his soul. He wrote thousands upon thousands of them throughout his life. To his daughters, Martha and Maria, his letters were filled with fatherly advice, affection, and a deep desire for them to pursue their own education. He'd send them books, discuss their studies, and share his observations from his travels. These weren't the formal pronouncements of a public figure, but the tender, sometimes anxious, words of a father separated from his children by duty and distance. In his correspondence with friends like James Madison and John Adams, you see the gears of a great mind at work. They debated philosophy, dissected political theories, and shared their dreams for the new American Republic. Even after a bitter political falling out, his late-life correspondence with Adams is a treasure of American literature. Two old revolutionaries, former rivals, reconnecting through the written word, reflecting on their shared history and the nation they helped create. It's a powerful testament to the idea that friendship, like a republic, can be repaired and strengthened through honest and open dialogue. But Jefferson's writing wasn't limited to grand ideas and personal letters. His farm book and garden book are masterpieces of observation. For over 50 years, he kept detailed journals of life. At Monticello, he recorded planting dates, harvest yields, the success or failure of a particular grape variety, and the daily tasks of the enslaved community who labored to make his vision a reality. These journals reveal a man deeply connected to the land, a scientist in his own right, constantly experimenting, observing, and learning from the natural world around him. He saw Monticello, not just as a home, but as a living laboratory. Think of the sheer discipline this required, every single day, for decades. This daily practice of writing wasn't a chore for him. It was a way of thinking, a way of ordering the world and his place in it. He believed that a clear mind was reflected in clear writing. His famous declaration that all men are created equal was a phrase that appeared out of thin air. It was the culmination of a lifetime of reading, thinking, and wrestling with the most profound questions of human existence, all honed through the constant, patient work of putting quill to paper. He was, in every sense, an architect. Just as he meticulously designed every brick and column of Monticello, he carefully constructed his sentences and arguments. He revised his drafts endlessly, searching for the perfect word, the most elegant turn of phrase. The Declaration of Independence, his most famous work, went through numerous revisions, with every word weighed and considered for its power and precision. He understood that words could build nations, inspire revolutions, and shape the course of history. They were his timber, his stone, his most enduring materials. When we visit Monticello today, we see the physical manifestation of his genius to architecture, the inventions, the gardens, but the true essence of the man can be found in the quiet spaces, in the library, at his writing desk. It's in the silent echo of his quill moving across the page, capturing a thought, expressing a feeling, or drafting a vision for a future he would not live to see. This is the Jefferson we often miss: the quiet scholar, the voracious reader, the dedicated correspondent, the gentle architect of words. By stepping into his library and imagining those early morning hours, we get a little closer to understanding the man behind the monument. We see that the grand ideas that shaped a nation were born not in the thunder of debate, but in the stillness of a room, with a man, a pen, and a boundless love for the written word. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the literary world of Thomas Jefferson. If you found this fascinating, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our journey through the life of Thomas Jefferson. In this chapter, we travel back in time, before the presidency, before the Declaration of Independence, to a young man whose greatest tool wasn't a sword, but a pen. This is a pen before power. Long before Jefferson's words would inspire a nation and shape a new form of government, he was a dedicated, almost obsessive note-taker. His journey into the world of letters and ideas truly began at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. Imagine a young, red-headed Jefferson, not yet a statesman, but a voracious student, rarely seen without a notebook in hand. These weren't just for class assignments. They were his personal universe, a place to capture, question, and organize the world around him. He arrived at William and Mary in 1760, a teenager with an insatiable curiosity. Under the mentorship of professors like William Small, Jefferson's mind was ignited. Small introduced him to the luminaries of the Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton. For Jefferson, their ideas weren't just abstract theories. They were practical tools for understanding reality, and his notebooks became the workshop where he hammered out this understanding. Flipping through the surviving pages of his early notebooks is like peering directly into the mind of a genius in the making. They are a whirlwind of subjects. One page might contain detailed notes on a legal principle from his law studies under the great George Wythe. He would meticulously copy legal precedents, analyze cases, and even draft his own legal arguments. He wasn't just learning the law, he was deconstructing it, understanding its architecture from the foundation up. This rigorous legal training would later prove indispensable when he began to construct the legal framework for a new nation. And the subject shifts dramatically. You might find a detailed observation of a plant he saw on a walk, complete with sketches and notes on its potential uses. Jefferson was a passionate naturalist and a farmer at heart. He documented weather patterns with scientific precision, recorded crop rotations, and theorized about soil improvement. To him, the natural world was a vast, open book filled with divine logic and practical wisdom. His pen was his lens, magnifying the intricate details of a flower petal or the grand cycle of the seasons. He saw no division between the study of law and the study of nature. Both were systems governed by underlying principles, waiting to be discovered and understood. Then, on another page, his focus would pivot to science and invention. He sketched designs for new gadgets, from improved plows to more efficient writing desks. He was fascinated by mechanics, chemistry, and astronomy. He wasn't just a passive consumer of knowledge. He was an active participant, constantly thinking about how to improve the world around him, how to make life more efficient, more rational, more enlightened. His notebooks were filled with calculations, diagrams, and ideas for innovations that blended practicality with a forward-thinking vision. But these notebooks were more than just a collection of facts. They revealed Jefferson's method of thinking. He created his own complex indexing systems, allowing him to cross-reference ideas across different subjects. He would jot down quotes from classical poets like Homer and Virgil right next to a legal maxim or a scientific formula. This shows us a mind that was constantly making connections, weaving together the arts, the sciences, and the humanities into a single, cohesive worldview. For Jefferson, a line of poetry could illuminate a legal principle, just as a law of physics could explain a natural phenomenon. This habit of writing everything down was a discipline. It was how he clarified his thoughts, challenged his own assumptions, and built his formidable intellect brick by brick. Every observation, every quote, every legal note was a piece of a larger puzzle he was assembling. He wasn't just studying to pass exams. He was studying to build a comprehensive philosophy for living, for governing, and for building a better society. These early years, spent with his nose in a book and a pen in his hand, were the forging ground for the man he would become. The meticulous attention to detail he learned while studying law would later be applied to drafting legislation. The rational inquiry he applied to science would inform his political philosophy, which was grounded in natural rights and reason. The love of order and beauty he found in nature and architecture would be reflected in his vision for an agrarian republic. So, when we think of Jefferson the revolutionary, Jefferson the diplomat, or Jefferson the president, we must remember where it all began. It began here, in the quiet, studious moments of his youth. It began with a young man in his notebooks, with an unshakable belief that the pen was the most powerful instrument for change. The words he practiced writing in these dog-eared volumes would one day be read around the world, igniting the fires of liberty and defining the very soul of a nation. His power didn't spring from a title or an office. It was cultivated, page by page, in the disciplined and passionate pursuit of knowledge. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. If you're enjoying this deep dive into history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue to create this content. Join us next time as we explore how Jefferson's world of ideas begins to collide with the turbulent political reality of colonial America. Say you 10. Have you ever wondered how the great minds of history sharpened their thinking and built their networks? For Thomas Jefferson, one of the most influential figures in American history, the answer was surprisingly simple, yet profoundly powerful. He wrote letters every single day. This wasn't just a casual hobby. It was a deliberate, lifelong ritual, a habit that began when he was just a young, ambitious lawyer trying to make his mark on the world. This daily practice of putting pen to paper became the bedrock upon which he built his philosophies, his relationships, and ultimately, his legacy. So, how did this simple act of correspondence transform a budding attorney into a revolutionary leader and a president? Let's delve into the habit of a lifetime. Welcome back to our series, Exploring the Life of Thomas Jefferson. In this chapter, we're focusing on a practice that was as essential to him as breathing: letter writing. Imagine this. Long before email, text messages, or social media, the primary way to communicate across distances was through handwritten letters. For Jefferson, this wasn't a chore. It was an opportunity. Even in his early years, juggling legal cases and poring over law books, he carved out time each day to write. He wasn't just sending quick updates. He was engaging in deep, meaningful dialogue with the world around him. This daily discipline wasn't about obligation. It was about connection, intellectual sparring, and self-discovery. It was a habit that would define his entire life and shape the course of a nation. So, who was Jefferson writing to during these formative years? His correspondents were a diverse and influential group. He wrote to his mentors, like George Wythe, the brilliant legal scholar who guided his early career. In these letters, Jefferson wasn't just a student seeking answers. He was a young thinker, grappling with complex legal and philosophical questions, testing his arguments, and absorbing the wisdom of a master. He also wrote to his friends, like his close college companion, John Page. With Page, the letters were more personal, filled with reflections on life, literature, and their shared dreams for the future. These weren't just friendly chats. They were a vital outlet for his emotions and a way to maintain bonds that would sustain him throughout his life. Then there were his professional colleagues, the other lawyers and politicians who were part of Virginia's bustling colonial society. Through his correspondence with them, Jefferson began to build his reputation. He discussed legal strategies, debated the political issues of the day, and shared his insights on governance and justice. Each letter was a carefully crafted piece of communication, a chance to demonstrate his intellect, his eloquence, and his growing command of the ideas that were swirling in the pre-revolutionary air. He was, in essence, networking, but it was a form of networking that was rich with substance, built on the currency of ideas rather than just handshakes and pleasantries. This web of connections, meticulously woven through daily correspondence, would become his political power base in the years to come. What's fascinating is how this habit of letter writing wasn't just about communicating with others. It was a profound act of self-creation. Think of each letter as a small workshop for his mind. When you're forced to articulate your thoughts clearly enough for someone else to understand, you're also forced to clarify them for yourself. Jefferson used his letters as a laboratory for his ideals. He would float an idea about liberty, question the nature of tyranny, or sketch out a vision for a more just society. The responses he received would then challenge him, force him to refine his arguments, and push his thinking to new levels. It was a dynamic, interactive process. His revolutionary ideas about democracy and individual rights weren't born in a vacuum. They were forged in the fire of written debate. This daily practice was also an exercise in discipline and eloquence. Jefferson was a master of the written word, and that mastery was honed through relentless practice. He chose his words with precision, structured his sentences for maximum impact, and developed a writing voice that was both authoritative and persuasive. In an era when rhetoric was a highly valued skill, Jefferson's prowess as a writer set him apart. His ability to express complex ideas with clarity and grace was a direct result of his commitment to writing every single day. The same skills he perfected in his personal letters to friends would later be deployed to draft the Declaration of Independence, a document that would change the world. The habit he cultivated as a young lawyer laid the foundation for his greatest literary and political achievements. Moreover, his letters served as a personal journal, a vast archive of his intellectual and emotional journey. By reading his correspondence from this period, we can trace the evolution of his thinking. We see the seeds of his later political philosophy taking root. We witness his grappling with the contradictions of his time, including the institution of slavery, a topic he discussed with a mixture of condemnation and personal entanglement. The letters provide an unfiltered window into his mind, revealing his ambitions, his doubts, his passions, and his principles. He was, in effect, writing his own story, one letter at a time. This incredible record allows us today to understand Jefferson not as a static monument, but as a living, breathing individual who was constantly learning, growing, and shaping his worldview. Consider the sheer volume of this undertaking. It's estimated that Jefferson wrote and received over 18,000 letters in his lifetime. This wasn't a passive activity. It required immense energy, organization, and a deep-seated belief in the power of the written word. He even invented a device, a version of the polygraph, that allowed him to make a copy of a letter as he was writing it, ensuring he always had a record of his correspondence. This speaks volumes about how much he valued this practice. It was central to his identity. He wasn't just a lawyer, a planter, or a politician. He was a correspondent, a man of letters who believed that progress, both personal and societal, was achieved through the free and open exchange of ideas. In a world that was often slow and disconnected, Jefferson's letters created a vibrant intellectual community. They were the threads that connected him to the great thinkers of the Enlightenment in Europe and the fellow patriots who were dreaming of a new kind of nation in America. Through his pen, he could debate with James Madison about the structure of a new government or exchange agricultural innovations with farmers across the Atlantic. This network, sustained by ink and paper, was his university, his political party, and his support system all rolled into one. The habit he formed as a young lawyer didn't just shape his own voice. It amplified the voices of an entire generation, creating the dialogue that would fuel a revolution. So, as we reflect on Jefferson's early career, we see that the courtroom and the law library were only part of the story. The other, equally important part, took place at his writing desk. It was there, in the quiet, focused act of writing, that he truly found himself. He shaped his voice, sharpened his ideals, and built the relationships that would define his life. The habit of a lifetime, formed in his youth, was the engine of his intellectual and political development. It demonstrates a powerful truth that consistent, deliberate practice in the art of communication can transform not only an individual but the world they inhabit. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. The story of Jefferson's life is a testament to the power of habit and the enduring value of thoughtful communication. If you found this exploration interesting, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We love hearing your thoughts, so please share them in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving into Chapter 4, Words That Built a Nation. We're stepping back to the sweltering summer of 1776, into a room filled with tension, hope, and the scent of revolution. This is where the United States of America was born, not on a battlefield, but on a piece of parchment. At the heart of this story is a young, red-headed Virginian lawyer named Thomas Jefferson. At just 33 years old, he was tasked by the Second Continental Congress with an immense responsibility: to draft a document that would articulate exactly why the 13 colonies were severing ties with the most powerful empire on earth, Great Britain. Imagine the pressure. This wasn't just a political memo. It was a declaration of war, a philosophical treatise, and a plea for international support, all rolled into one. The committee, which included giants like John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, chose Jefferson for his renowned eloquence, what Adams called his peculiar felicity of expression. They knew they needed more than just a list of grievances. They needed poetry. They needed words that would resonate through the ages. So, Jefferson locked himself away for 17 days. With quill and ink, he began to pour onto paper the ideas that had been swirling in the colonies for years: the radical notions of the Enlightenment thinkers, like John Locke. He wasn't trying to invent something entirely new. His goal, as he later said, was to create an expression of the American mind. He was synthesizing the spirit of the moment into a coherent, powerful argument. He structured the Declaration into 3 main parts. First, the iconic preamble, which lays out the philosophical foundation for revolution. Second, a long, detailed list of grievances against King George III. And third, the formal Declaration of Independence itself. It was a legal brief against a king, accusing him of tyranny and breaking the social contract with his American subjects. But it's the second sentence of the preamble that truly stops us in our tracks. Even today, we hold these truths to be self-evident: that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's break that down. We hold these truths to be self-evident. This is a brilliant rhetorical move. Jefferson isn't saying, "We think this might be true," or "We'd like to argue that, ... He's stating it as an undeniable, universal fact, like a law of nature. It requires no proof because it is obvious to anyone with reason. It's a foundation of pure confidence. Then comes the bombshell. All men are created equal. Let's be very clear about the context. Jefferson, the man who penned these words, was a slaveholder. So were many of the men who signed the document. This is the central paradox, the profound contradiction at the heart of the American founding. How could a man who owned other human beings write that all men are created equal? This is a question historians have wrestled with for centuries. Some argue it was sheer hypocrisy. Others suggest that the term men was understood at the time to mean white, property-owning men. And some believe that Jefferson was writing an ideal and aspirational goal that he himself and the new nation failed to live up to. He was setting a standard that he knew they weren't meeting, perhaps hoping that future generations would be inspired to close that gap between ideal and reality. The moral courage here lies not in perfection, but in daring to write the words at all. In a world dominated by monarchies and rigid social hierarchies, the idea that a common farmer had the same inherent rights as a king was revolutionary. It was a radical statement that turned the world upside down. It was a promise that would fuel the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, and the civil rights movement for the next 2 centuries. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would later call it a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. And what about those rights? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This was a clever adaptation of John Locke's Life, Liberty, and Property. Jefferson's switch from property to the pursuit of happiness is incredibly significant. It broadens the scope of human ambition. Government isn't just there to protect your stuff. It's there to create the conditions under which you can seek fulfillment, meaning, and joy. It's a profoundly optimistic and humanistic vision for the purpose of a nation. After Jefferson finished his initial draft, he presented it to the committee. Franklin and Adams made some minor edits. For example, Jefferson had originally written, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." It was likely Franklin who suggested the more powerful and logical self-evident, and the draft went to the floor of the Continental Congress. For 2 days, the delegates debated, scrutinized, and hacked away at Jefferson's text. They made 86 changes in total, cutting about a quarter of the original content. Jefferson was mortified. He sat silently, fuming as his carefully crafted prose was picked apart. The most significant deletion was a long passage condemning the slave trade, which Jefferson blamed on King George. The southern colonies, Georgia and South Carolina, along with some northern delegates involved in the trade, demanded its removal. It was a painful compromise, one that kicked the can of slavery down the road and would ultimately lead to a civil war. But on July 4th, 1776, the final text was approved. The delegates didn't just sign a document. They signed their own death warrants. They were committing treason against the crown. The final line reads, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." They knew that if the revolution failed, they would be hunted down and executed. This was the ultimate act of courage, backing up their powerful words with the ultimate personal risk. The Declaration of Independence wasn't law. It didn't create a government. What it did was create a nation. It established a shared American creed, a set of ideals that, however imperfectly realized, have defined the nation's identity and aspirations ever since. The words Jefferson wrote became the moral and philosophical compass for the United States. They were a beacon of hope for people around the world fighting for their own freedom, inspiring countless other independence movements. So, when we look back at that summer in Philadelphia, we see the incredible power of language. We see how a few carefully chosen words, penned by a young visionary, could articulate a revolution, define a nation's soul, and set in motion a struggle for equality that continues to this very day. The Declaration is not a dusty old document. It's a living, breathing conversation we're still having with ourselves about who we are and who we want to be. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. The story of America is complex, and it's important we examine all of it, the triumphs and the contradictions. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more chapters of our shared history. We'll see you in the next video. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving into Chapter 5, the correspondence of revolution. Imagine trying to win a war, build a nation, and negotiate with global superpowers, all without email, phones, or even a reliable postal service. This was the reality for the American revolutionaries. Their most powerful weapon, ink and parchment. Let's start with the sheer volume of letters. George Washington, as commander-in-chief, wrote an estimated 17,000 letters during the war. Think about that, it's an average of 7 letters every single day, for 8 years straight. These weren't just quick notes. They were detailed strategic orders, desperate pleas for supplies, and crucial intelligence reports. Each one had to be handwritten, often by candlelight in a freezing tent, and then dispatched by a rider who faced capture, harsh weather, and treacherous roads. The delay could be days, sometimes weeks. A single lost letter could mean a lost battle. One of Washington's most frequent correspondents was the Continental Congress. He constantly had to persuade, cajole, and sometimes outright beg for support. His letters paint a vivid picture of the Army's suffering, especially during the brutal winter at Valley Forge. He wrote of soldiers with no shoes, leaving bloody footprints in the snow, and of the constant threat of starvation and disease. These letters were not just reports. They were powerful tools of persuasion, designed to move a cash-strapped Congress to action. Washington's quill was as mighty as his sword in keeping the Continental Army alive. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a different kind of battle was being waged by American diplomats, most notably Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. Stationed in Paris, they were tasked with the monumental goal of securing French support. Their letters to each other and back to Congress are a masterclass in diplomacy, intrigue, and sometimes clashing personalities. Franklin, the seasoned diplomat, was a celebrity in Paris. He used his charm and wit to navigate the complex world of the French court. His letters are often filled with subtle observations, coded language, and a deep understanding of European politics. He knew that winning over the French wasn't just about military arguments. It was about convincing them that America was a stable, worthy, and ultimately winning investment. John Adams, on the other hand, was a stark contrast. It was direct, often impatient, and deeply suspicious of the aristocratic pomp of the French court. His letters are passionate, sometimes fiery, and brutally honest. While Franklin charmed, Adams pushed. The correspondence between them reveals a fascinating dynamic. They didn't always agree on tactics, with Adams often frustrated by Franklin's more patient approach. Yet, their combined efforts were indispensable. Franklin secured the treaties, while Adams's relentless work in the Netherlands secured crucial loans that kept the revolution financially afloat. Their letters show us that diplomacy isn't a single performance, but a complex dance of different styles and all working towards a common goal. These letters also crossed paths in intricate ways. A dispatch from Washington detailing a small victory on the battlefield could become a powerful tool for Franklin in Paris. He could use that news to demonstrate American resilience and military capability, making the case for more French aid. A letter from Adams about a new loan could give Washington the hope he needed to keep his army's morale from collapsing. The entire revolutionary effort was a vast, interconnected web, held together by these fragile threads of ink and paper. And let's not forget the risks. Sending sensitive information was incredibly dangerous. The British had spies everywhere, and intercepting mail was a common tactic. Tokomba's founders used a variety of methods. They used ciphers and codes, invisible ink which could be revealed by heat or a chemical reaction, and trusted couriers who knew the back roads. Sometimes they wrote multiple copies of the same letter and sent them by different routes, hoping at least one would get through. Every letter sent was a gamble. It carried not only information, but also the lives of spies, the plans for battles, and the very future of the new nation. The correspondence wasn't just about grand strategy and high politics. It was also deeply personal. In their letters, you can feel the weight of the world on these men's shoulders. You read of Washington's frustration, Adams's loneliness and longing for his wife Abigail, and Franklin's quiet determination. They shared news of their families, their health, and their fears. These weren't demigods. They were human beings, separated from their homes and loved ones, bound together by a shared cause and the letters that connected them. For example, the famous correspondence between John and Abigail Adams gives us an unparalleled window into the Revolutionary era. While John was in Philadelphia or Europe, Abigail managed their farm, raised their children, and served as his most trusted advisor. Her letters were filled with sharp political insights and famously urged him to remember the ladies when forming the new government. Their exchange is a testament to their intellectual and emotional partnership, a private conversation that has become a public treasure. So, when we think of the American Revolution, let's remember not just the soldiers on the battlefield, but also the riders in their tents and embassies. The revolution was fought with cannons and muskets, but it was organized, sustained, and ultimately won through the tireless, dangerous, and world-changing act of writing letters. The correspondence of the revolution is the invisible architecture that supported the entire fight for independence. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the letters that shaped a nation. It really goes to show how powerful the written word can be. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our series on the life of Thomas Jefferson. In this chapter, Private Thoughts, Public Times, we're peeling back the layers of the public figure to reveal the man behind the myth. We often see Jefferson as a towering, confident founder, the eloquent author of the Declaration of Independence. But what was going on in his mind during the chaotic birth of a nation? To find out, we're diving into his most personal letters. Imagine the pressure. You're trying to build a new form of government, debating every clause, fighting political battles, and all the while, the eyes of the world are on you. It's easy to assume these founders were unshakable. But Jefferson's private correspondence tells a different story. In letters to close friends like James Madison and his daughter Martha, we see a man wrestling with profound self-doubt. Was this grand experiment in democracy even going to work? Was he the right person for the job? He confessed his anxieties, writing about the sea of politics that threatened to overwhelm him. It's a stark contrast to the resolute public image he carefully maintained. Then there was the sheer exhaustion. Jefferson wasn't just a thinker. It was a doer juggling roles as a diplomat, a statesman, and the leader of a political party. His letters from this period are filled with complaints of headaches, fatigue, and what he called a diabolical workload. He often expressed a deep, yearning desire to retreat from the public stage and return to the quiet life of a scholar and farmer at Monticello. He wrote about his supreme delight being the simple pleasures of his garden and his family, a world away from the bitter political fights in Philadelphia. This wasn't just a passing thought. It was a constant, recurring theme, a pull between his sense of duty and his personal longing for peace. These letters show a man deeply in touch with his own mortality and legacy. He reflected on the sacrifices he was making, not just for himself, but for future generations. He wrote about planting trees at Monticello, knowing he wouldn't live to see them reach their full height, but finding satisfaction in the idea that others would enjoy their shade. This was Jefferson, the philosopher, contemplating his place in the long arc of history. He worried about how he would be remembered, and more importantly, whether the republic he was helping to build would endure after he was gone. One of the most poignant aspects of his private writings is his relationship with his daughters, Martha and Maria. While he was shaping a nation, he was also a father, often separated from his children by hundreds of miles. His letters to them are a touching mix of fatherly advice, intellectual guidance, and pure, heartfelt affection. He urged them to read, to study, to cultivate their minds. But he also expressed his deep loneliness and his constant worry for their well-being. "The sun has not beamed on you for a 12-month," he wrote to Maria, capturing the pain of their long separation while he served in France. These letters reveal a vulnerability and a tenderness that are often lost in the grand narrative of his political career. They show us that behind the statesman was a father who missed his kids, just like any parent would. So, what do we make of this more complex, more human Jefferson? It reminds us that our historical figures were not marble statues. They were flesh and blood, filled with the same doubts, fears, and hopes that we all experience. Jefferson's private thoughts, scribbled by candlelight late at night, give us a more complete picture. They show a man who, despite his exhaustion and his internal struggles, repeatedly chose public service over private comfort. He believed so deeply in the cause of liberty that he was willing to sacrifice his own happiness for it. This glimpse into his inner world doesn't diminish his stature. If anything, it enhances it. It shows us that true strength isn't the absence of doubt, but the courage to act in spite of it. Jefferson's public life was a performance, but his private letters are the backstage pass, revealing the incredible personal cost of founding a nation. It's a powerful lesson in leadership, sacrifice, and the enduring tension between our public duties and our private selves. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Jefferson's personal world. It's in these quiet moments of reflection that we often find the true measure of a person. If you found this perspective interesting, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you and miss the next chapter in our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, take care. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the life of Thomas Jefferson. Today, in Chapter 7, we're crossing the Atlantic. The year is 1784, and Jefferson, recently widowed and still grieving, accepts a post to join Benjamin Franklin and John Adams in Paris. He thought he'd only be gone for a short time, but this trip would change him and America forever. Imagine stepping from the rustic, fledgling United States into the heart of 18th century Europe. Paris was the epicenter of the Enlightenment, a dazzling world of art, science, and revolutionary ideas. For Jefferson, a man with an insatiable curiosity. It was like a dream. He wasn't just a diplomat. He was a student, an observer, and a chronicler of this vibrant culture. His thoughts and discoveries weren't kept in a private diary. Instead, he poured them into a steady stream of letters to his closest confidants back home. Two of his most important correspondents were James Madison, his political protege, and Abigail Adams, a sharp-witted friend and the wife of his fellow diplomat, John Adams. These letters open a window directly into Jefferson's mind as he navigated this exhilarating new world. Writing to James Madison, Jefferson's letters were a masterclass in political observation. He was witnessing firsthand the rumblings of the French Revolution. He saw a society groaning under the weight of an absolute monarchy and a rigid class system. In one letter, he famously wrote about the stark contrast between the universal happiness of America and the misery of the great mass of the people in France. He described stumbling upon a poor peasant woman and realizing the deep injustice of a system where the land was owned by the few, while the many starved. These weren't just travel anecdotes. Jefferson was analyzing the French political structure, sending Madison detailed reports on everything from parliamentary procedures to tax policies. He saw the flaws in their system and became even more convinced of the virtues of the American experiment in self-government. He urged Madison to strengthen their own republic, to learn from Europe's mistakes. He was, in essence, a foreign correspondent for the new American government, providing crucial intelligence that would shape the U.S. Constitution. He wrote, "The tyranny of the legislatures is the most formidable dread at present, and will be for long years." He was deeply concerned about government overreach, a theme that would define his political career. While his letters to Madison were filled with political theory, his correspondence with Abigail Adams reveals a different side of Jefferson. With Abigail, he could be more personal, sharing his passion for the arts, architecture, and the latest innovations. He was utterly captivated by French culture. He attended concerts, visited salons, and spent countless hours exploring art galleries and architectural marvels. He wrote to Abigail about the Maison Carrée, an ancient Roman temple in the south of France, which he gazed at for hours, like a lover at his mistress. This building would later become the direct inspiration for the Virginia state capitol, a perfect example of how his European experiences were physically transported back to America. He sent her detailed descriptions of Parisian fashion, new scientific gadgets, and even the way the French served their food. Jefferson was a man of science and progress. He was fascinated by everything from hot air balloons, a brand new invention at the time, to advancements in agriculture. He meticulously studied French vineyards, hoping to cultivate wine in Virginia. He discovered new crops, like Italian rice, and devised a way to smuggle the grains out of the country to plant back home, believing it would boost the American economy. To Jefferson, innovation wasn't just a hobby. It was a patriotic duty. Every new idea, every improved machine, was a tool to build a better, more prosperous, and independent America. But his time in France wasn't all high-minded philosophy and art. It was also a time of profound personal transformation. He had arrived a grieving widower, but in Paris, he found a world that reawakened his spirit. He formed deep friendships and, famously, a deep and complicated relationship with Maria Causeway, an Anglo-Italian artist. Their connection inspired one of his most famous pieces of writing, The Dialogue Between My Head and My Heart, where he debates the struggle between cold, hard reason and passionate emotion. This internal conflict, sparked in the romantic air of Paris, reveals a more human, more vulnerable Jefferson than the stoic statesman we often imagine. As the 1780s came to a close, the political situation in France grew more and more volatile. The whispers of discontent Jefferson had observed turned into the roar of revolution. He watched with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the Bastille fell in 1789. He was a supporter of the revolution's initial ideals, liberty, equality, and fraternity, as they seemed to echo America's own struggle. However, he would later be horrified by the extreme violence of the Reign of Terror. When Jefferson finally sailed back to America in late 1789, he was a changed man. The 5 years he spent across the ocean had broadened his perspective immeasurably. He returned not just with crates of French wine, books, and art, but with a refined political philosophy, a deeper appreciation for culture, and a renewed vision for his country. The seeds of thought planted in the salons and streets of Paris would blossom in the fields of Monticello and the halls of Washington, D.C., shaping his presidency and the very identity of the young American nation. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. Jefferson's time in France was a pivotal moment in his life, and its influence is a fascinating thread to follow. If you enjoyed this exploration, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. We'd love to have you with us for the next chapter. See you then. Hello, and welcome back to our series exploring the life of Thomas Jefferson. Today, we're stepping away from the halls of power and into the private world of a man deeply in love and, later, profoundly heartbroken. This is a story told through his own words, a story of love and loss that would forever change the man we think we know. Before the Declaration of Independence, before the presidency, there was and at its heart was Martha Wales. Skelton Jefferson. Their 10-year marriage was, by all accounts, a period of immense happiness for Jefferson. They shared a love for music, literature, and the home they were building together. He wasn't just a statesman. He was a devoted husband. The most intimate glimpses we have into their relationship come from Jefferson's own hand. While his official papers are vast, his personal correspondence is often guarded. Yet, in the few surviving letters to Martha, a different Jefferson emerges. One letter, written while he was away, speaks volumes of his longing. He writes about the drudgery of his duties and how his thoughts constantly stray back to her and their home. He doesn't use flowery, poetic language, but the sentiment is clear and deeply touching. He misses his partner, his intellectual equal, his companion. He details his day, but always brings it back to his desire to be with her, sharing his world, even from a distance. It's in these simple, heartfelt lines that we see the depth of their connection. He wasn't just writing to a wife, he was writing to his best friend. Their life together, however, was marked by constant worry. Childbirth in the 18th century was perilous, and Martha's health was fragile. She endured 6 pregnancies, but only 2 of their children, Martha and Mary, survived to adulthood. Each loss chipped away at her strength, and Jefferson watched, helpless, as the woman he adored grew weaker. He often canceled political trips and duties to stay by her side, a testament to where his true priorities lay. His world revolved not around Philadelphia or Paris, but around Martha's bedside. In the summer of 1782, following the birth of their last child, Martha's health collapsed completely. For 4 agonizing months, Jefferson never left her side. He abandoned all his public responsibilities, dedicating every moment to her care. He nursed her, read to her, and simply sat with her as she faded. It was during this time that they reportedly copied a passage from their favorite novel, Lawrence Sterne's Tristram Shandy, about the pain of separation. It was a shared acknowledgement of the inevitable. On her deathbed, Martha made Jefferson promise he would never remarry. She couldn't bear the thought of another woman raising her children. He gave her his word. On September 6, 1782, at the age of just 33, Martha Jefferson died. With her passing, the brightest chapter of Jefferson's personal life came to a close. The grief that followed was immense and all. According to his daughter Martha, who was 10 at the time, Jefferson fainted and had to be carried from the room. For 3 weeks, he locked himself away, pacing back and forth in his library, inconsolable. When he finally emerged, it was as if a part of him had been extinguished. He would ride his horse for hours on end, through the woods and mountains surrounding Monticello, seeking solitude in the vastness of nature, a silent communion with his sorrow. His daughter later wrote, "The violence of his emotion was terrible. He burned nearly all of their correspondence, a desperate attempt to keep their intimate world private, shielded from the prying eyes of history. This act, while a loss for historians, speaks volumes about the sanctity of their bond. He was protecting not a public figure's legacy, but a husband's most cherished memories." The loss of Martha fundamentally reshaped Jefferson. The once sociable and optimistic man became more reserved, more inward-looking. He threw himself into his work with a ferocious intensity, perhaps as a way to numb the pain. He accepted a diplomatic post in France shortly after, a move many saw as an escape from the ghost-filled halls of Monticello. The man who sailed for Europe was not the same man who had declared independence. He was a widower, a single father, a man carrying a quiet, permanent sadness. He kept his promise to Martha. He never For the remaining 44 years of his life, he navigated the complex worlds of politics, science, and philosophy. But a part of his heart remained buried with his wife on that Virginia mountaintop. The quiet pain of her loss became an unspoken part of his character, a shadow that followed him through the presidency and into his final days. This chapter of Jefferson's life reminds us that behind every great historical figure is a human being, with a heart capable of profound love and devastating sorrow. His letters, and the story of his grief, offer a rare and poignant look at the man behind the monument. Thank you so much for joining us for this deeply personal story. It's a side of history we don't often get to see. If you found this moving, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the past. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to our journey through the life of Thomas Jefferson. Today, we step away from the halls of power and the fields of his plantation to enter a far more personal, yet equally vast, domain. His study. This wasn't just an office. It was the nerve center of a brilliant mind, a sanctuary of knowledge. We'll call the philosopher in his study. Imagine a room, not just lined, but overflowing with books. We're not talking about a few dozen, or even a few hundred. At its peak, Jefferson's collection numbered nearly 6,500 volumes, making it the largest personal library in North America at the time. This wasn't a collection for show. These were working books, tools for a mind that was relentlessly curious. Their spines were cracked, their margins filled with his neat, precise annotations. He read in 7 languages, and his collection spanned every conceivable subject, from law and politics to agriculture and architecture, from ancient history and classical philosophy to the very latest scientific discoveries. For Jefferson, books were more than just repositories of information. They were dialogues across time. He could converse with Plato about the ideal republic, debate agricultural techniques with Roman writers, and study the architectural principles of Palladio, all from the comfort of his wingback chair at Monticello. His library was a physical manifestation of his belief in the power of an informed citizenry. Eon se doblerot. I cannot live without books. Looking at the sheer scale of his collection, you know he meant it, literally. It was the fuel for his intellectual fire, the foundation upon which he built his vision for a new nation. This passion for knowledge wasn't a solitary pursuit. Jefferson's study was also a hub of global communication. In an age of sail and horse, he maintained a staggering volume of correspondence. It's estimated he wrote and received over 20,000 letters in his lifetime. This wasn't idle chatter. This was a vibrant exchange of ideas with the greatest minds of his era. He corresponded with scientists like Joseph Priestley, discussing a new discovery in chemistry. He debated philosophy and a government's role with his old friend and political rival, John Adams. In their later years, he exchanged letters with artists and architects in Europe, seeking inspiration for his own designs at Monticello and the University of Virginia. He corresponded with a new generation of American leaders, sharing his wisdom and experience. Each letter sent and received was a thread in a vast web of intellectual inquiry, connecting his secluded Virginia mountaintop to the capitals of Europe and the burgeoning cities padros of America. Think about the sheer effort involved. Every letter was written by hand, with a quill pen dipped in ink. Copies were often made using a polygraph, a device he adored, which used a second pen to duplicate his every stroke. Then, these letters would embark on long, often perilous journeys across the Atlantic or the rugged American landscape. Yet, Jefferson committed to this practice his entire life. Why? Because he understood that ideas grow not in isolation, but in conversation. He saw himself as part of a global republic of letters, a community of thinkers dedicated to a shared pursuit of truth and progress. His library and his letters were 2 sides of the same coin. The books provided the knowledge, and the correspondenciali the platform to debate, refine, and disseminate that knowledge. For example, he would read about a new agricultural method from a book sent from France, test it on his own farm, and then write to a friend in South Carolina to share his results and ask about their experiences. It was a living, breathing process of learning and sharing. This was the Enlightenment ideal in practice. The belief that through reason, observation, and open dialogue, humanity could solve its problems and build a better future. This commitment to knowledge had a profound and lasting impact on the United States. After the British burned the original Library of Congress in 1814, Jefferson offered his personal collection to the nation as a replacement. It was a controversial move. Some congressmen balked at the price and the wide range of subjects, questioning why the government needed books on philosophy or in foreign languages. But Jefferson prevailed. He argued that there is no subject to which a member of Congress may not have occasion to refer. By selling his library to the nation, Jefferson did more than just restock some shelves. He laid the philosophical cornerstone for what would become the world's greatest repository of knowledge, the Library of Congress. He enshrined the idea that a republic's legislature must be universally informed, that knowledge is not a luxury but a necessity for self-governance. The books that once filled his private study became the seed of a national treasure, accessible to generations of Americans. So, when we picture Jefferson the statesman, the diplomator, the farmer, we must also picture Jefferson the philosopher, sitting in his study late into the night. The room is quiet, lit only by the soft glow of candlelight. He is surrounded by his thousand-fold family of books. A letter from a friend in Paris open on his desk, his mind alight with a new idea. This was the engine room of his genius. It was here, amidst his books and letters, that he wrestled with the timeless questions of human liberty, a government's purpose, and the pursuit of happiness. And it was from this sanctuary of thought that he sent forth the ideas that would shape a nation and inspire the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Jefferson's world of ideas. If you found this fascinating, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our journey through the life of Thomas Jefferson. Today, we're diving into Chapter 10, President with a Pen. Now, when you picture a U.S. president, you might think of grand speeches, public rallies, or fiery debates. But Jefferson, he charted a different course. During his time in the White House, he wielded his most powerful tool not from a podium, but from his desk, his weapon of choice, a simple pen and ink. Imagine this, the early 1800s. The nation is young, political tensions are high, and the president needs to navigate a maze of challenges. Instead of delivering thundering orations, Jefferson preferred a quieter, more strategic approach. He believed that public speeches could often stir up unnecessary conflict and division. Why shout when you can write? For him, the written word was more precise, more personal, and far more effective for the delicate art of politics. He used letters to manage his cabinet, to soothe rivalries, to negotiate with foreign powers, and to keep his finger on the pulse of the nation, all without ever raising his voice in a public forum. This was a deliberate choice. Jefferson was notoriously soft-spoken and disliked the confrontational nature of public speaking. He saw it as a performance, whereas a letter was a direct conversation, a meeting of minds. Through his correspondence, he could tailor his message to each recipient, whether it was a close friend, a political ally, or a formidable opponent. He could be persuasive, firm, or conciliatory, all with the careful selection of words. It was a form of silent leadership, a presidency conducted through thousands of pages of ink. One of the most fascinating aspects of this method was how he managed his own political party, the Democratic Republic. He wasn't a president who barked orders. Instead, he built consensus through correspondence. He would write to key congressmen, laying out his reasoning on a particular bill or policy, gently persuading them to see his point of view. It was a subtle but incredibly effective way to guide legislation and maintain party unity. He was essentially a master networker, using his letters to build a web of influence that stretched from the Capitol to the farthest corners of the country. Think about the sheer scale of this operation. Jefferson wrote and received an astonishing number of letters. His days often started before sunrise, with hours dedicated to correspondence. This wasn't just administrative work. It was the very engine of his presidency. He used letters to gather information, sending out queries to experts on everything from agriculture to Native American languages. He was a president who learned through writing, who governed through writing, and who built relationships through writing. He was, in essence, the nation's chief correspondent. This preference for ink over oration also played a crucial role in his foreign policy. When dealing with delicate international situations, like the Louisiana Purchase or tensions with Britain and France, a public speech could easily be misconstrued and escalate a crisis. A carefully drafted letter, however, allowed for nuance and diplomacy. He could communicate his intentions clearly and privately to foreign ministers and heads of state, avoiding the unpredictable nature of public spectacle. This gave him a level of control and discretion that was vital for a young nation trying to find its place on the world stage. This presidency by pen also allowed Jefferson to maintain his connection with the American people, but in a very unique way. While he avoided grand public addresses, he corresponded with countless ordinary citizens who wrote to him. Farmers, inventors, scientists, and scholars would send him their ideas and concerns, and remarkably, he often wrote back. This created a different kind of relationship between the president and the populace, one based not on charisma and rhetoric, but on a shared intellectual exchange. It reinforced his image as a man of the people, an accessible leader who valued reason and dialogue. Even his political rivalries were managed through the mail. While his relationship with figures like Alexander Hamilton was famously contentious, his correspondence with others, like John Adams, reveals the complexity of his character. After years of bitter political division, it was through a renewed exchange of letters in their retirement that Jefferson and Adams reconciled, leaving behind a treasure trove of correspondence that allows us to understand their perspectives and the evolution of their friendship. It's a powerful testament to Jefferson's belief in the restorative power of the written word. So, as we look back at Jefferson's time in office, it's clear that his legacy isn't just in the policies he enacted, but in how he enacted them. He redefined the tools of presidential power, demonstrating that influence could be wielded just as effectively with a pen as with a proclamation. He showed that quiet, deliberate communication could be a source of immense strength. His presidency was a masterclass in silent statecraft, proving that sometimes the most powerful words are the ones that are written, not spoken. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. It's a side of the presidency we don't often consider, but it's absolutely central to understanding the man Thomas Jefferson was. If you found this interesting, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next one. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the life and mind of Thomas Jefferson. Today, in Chapter 11, we're exploring a side of him that truly defined his character: his boundless scientific curiosity. Jefferson wasn't just a politician or a statesman. He was a true product of the Enlightenment, a man whose mind was constantly buzzing with questions about the world around him. His letters are a treasure trove, not of political maneuvering, but of scientific inquiry, architectural dreams, and cosmic wonder. They give us a unique window into the restless, inventive spirit of a man who believed that knowledge was the key to human progress and happiness. So, let's peel back the layers of the political figure and meet Jefferson, the scientist, the inventor, the farmer, and the stargazer. Jefferson once wrote, "There is not a sprig of grass that shoots uninteresting to me." This wasn't just a poetic phrase, it was his reality. His passion for botany was all-consuming. At Monticello, his mountaintop home, he created what was essentially a living laboratory. He meticulously documented everything, from the first bloom of a pea plant to the success or failure of a new variety of olive tree he imported from France. His letters are filled with requests for seeds, detailed descriptions of plant anatomy, and excited reports on his agricultural experiments. He exchanged correspondence and plant samples with botanists across America and Europe, creating an international network of knowledge. He wasn't just collecting plants for their beauty, he was on a mission. He believed that by finding and cultivating the right crops, America could achieve true economic independence. He saw agriculture as the noblest of pursuits and the foundation of the new republic. Through his letters, we see a man deeply connected to the soil, constantly observing, recording, and learning from the natural world. He wasn't just a gardener. He was a pioneering agricultural scientist, using his own land to answer questions that could benefit the entire nation. This same passion for observation and improvement extended to the skies. Jefferson was a devoted amateur astronomer. He owned several telescopes and would spend hours charting the movements of the planets and stars. An eclipse wasn't just a celestial event. It was an opportunity for precise data collection. He would write to friends like David Ritt, another leading American scientist, to coordinate observations from different locations. Why? So they could use the astronomical data to accurately calculate longitude and map the vast, uncharted territories of the American continent. For Jefferson, astronomy wasn't an abstract hobby. It was a practical tool for nation building. It connected to his vision of westward expansion, embodied by the Lewis and Clark expedition, which he meticulously planned. He instructed Lewis on how to take astronomical readings to create the first accurate maps of the American West. His fascination with the cosmos was tied directly to his vision for American nation, defined by its landscape, explored by its people, and understood through the rigorous application of scientific principles. His letters reveal a mind that could simultaneously contemplate the vastness of the universe and the practical challenge of drawing a map. Now, let's talk about something you can still see and touch today: Jefferson's architecture. If you've ever seen pictures of Monticello or the University of Virginia, you've seen his scientific mind at work, expressed in brick and mortar. He called architecture his delight, and his approach was anything but conventional. He studied the classical forms of ancient Greece and Rome, not just to copy them, but to understand the mathematical principles of harmony, proportion, and balance that made them so enduring. He believed that a building's design could shape the minds and morals of the people within it. His letters are filled with detailed sketches, precise measurements, and instructions for his builders. He was obsessed with innovation. Monticello is full of his inventions: dumbwaiters to bring wine up from the cellar, a revolving bookstand that allowed him to consult 5 books at once, and a great clock powered by cannonball weights that told him both the time and the day of the week. This wasn't just about convenience. Each invention was a solution to a problem, an exercise in practical mechanics and physics. He saw his home as an ongoing experiment in living. He was constantly tinkering, redesigning, and rebuilding, always striving for greater efficiency, more light, and a more rational use of space. His buildings were a physical manifestation of his belief in order, reason, and progress. Beyond these major fields, Jefferson's curiosity was truly limitless. His letters show a man fascinated by literally everything. He wrote about meteorology, compiling decades of weather data to understand climate patterns. He was a paleontologist, famously studying the fossilized bones of a mastodon, which he believed proved that the American continent hosted creatures far grander than those of Europe. He was interested in linguistics, collecting vocabularies of Native American languages in an attempt to trace their origins in history. He designed a new type of plow, the moldboard of least resistance, based on mathematical principles to make it more efficient. He applied scientific thinking to everything he did. This wasn't just a collection of hobbies. It was a unified worldview. For Jefferson, there was no sharp dividing line between science, politics, and daily life. The same principles of reason, observation, evidence, and logical inquiry that guided his scientific experiments also guided his political philosophy. He believed that a republic could only thrive if its citizens were educated, curious, and capable of thinking for themselves. His relentless pursuit of knowledge wasn't just for personal satisfaction. He saw it as a civic duty. So, what does this all tell us about the man? It shows that Thomas Jefferson's mind was never at rest. He was a perpetual student, constantly driven by a need to understand how asterisk things worked. Whether he was grafting a tree, observing a planet, designing a dome, or drafting a law, his approach was rooted in scientific inquiry. He believed that the universe was an ordered, knowable place, and that through reason and observation, humanity could unlock its secrets and build a better future. His letters are not just historical documents. They are a vibrant, living record of one of history's most inquisitive and inventive minds. They remind us that the spirit of curiosity, the desire to ask questions, to experiment, to learn is one of the most powerful forces for progress we possess. Jefferson's legacy isn't just in the Declaration of Independence. It's in every library, every laboratory, and every classroom that fosters that same spirit of endless inquiry. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Jefferson's scientific world. I hope it's given you a new appreciation for the incredible breadth of his intellect. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue exploring history with us, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next chapter. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into something truly special. A chapter that feels like uncovering a hidden treasure chest of wisdom. We're exploring the heartfelt advice and profound insights shared by a remarkable individual in his later years, specifically through his letters to the next generation. This isn't just about historical correspondence. It's about timeless wisdom that speaks directly to us today. Imagine having a direct line to one of the great minds of the past, someone who has navigated immense challenges and celebrated incredible triumphs. That's exactly what we get in this chapter. After retiring from the whirlwind of public life, he didn't just fade into the background. Instead, he picked up his pen and began a new, quieter, but equally important mission. Mentoring the future. The core of this chapter is a collection of letters. These weren't formal, stuffy documents. They were deeply personal messages, filled with warmth, candor, and genuine care. The primary recipients were his own daughters and granddaughters. Through these letters, we had a rare, intimate glimpse into his role, not just as a public figure, but as a father and a grandfather. He shared his hopes, his fears, and his most valuable life lessons with the people he loved most. He would write to his daughters about the importance of education, not just for acquiring knowledge, but for developing critical thinking and a curious mind. He encouraged them to be resilient, to face adversity with courage and grace. You can feel the fatherly pride and protective instinct in his words, wanting to equip them with the mental and emotional tools to navigate a world that was often challenging, especially for women. He didn't just preach, he shared his own experiences, his own moments of doubt, and how he overcame them. Then there are the letters to his granddaughters. Here, the tone often shifts to one of playful affection mixed with profound advice. He'd talk about the simple joys of life, the beauty of a garden, the pleasure of a good book, the importance of laughter. He wanted them to cultivate not just their minds, but also their character. He stressed virtues like honesty, compassion, and integrity, framing them not as old-fashioned rules, but as the very foundation of a happy and meaningful life. He saw the potential in them, a new generation poised to shape the future, and he wanted to nurture that spark. But his correspondence didn't stop with his family. As his reputation as a wise elder grew, young people from all across America began writing to him. They were students, aspiring leaders, and everyday citizens seeking guidance on everything from career choices to personal dilemmas to the future of their country. They saw him as a source of clarity in a complex world, and he honored that trust with thoughtful and encouraging responses. In these letters to young Americans, he often spoke about the responsibilities of citizenship. He believed that a healthy republic depended on an active, informed, and virtuous citizenry. He wasn't lecturing from an ivory tower. He was inviting them into a conversation. He would challenge them to think critically about the issues of the day, to engage in civil discourse, and to always strive to contribute positively to their communities. He had an unwavering faith in the potential of young people to uphold and improve upon the ideals of the nation. One of the most powerful recurring themes in all these letters is the concept of a life of purpose. He urged the next generation not to chase fleeting fame or fortune, but to find a calling that aligned with their values and served a greater good. He believed that true fulfillment comes from contribution, from leaving the world a little better than you found it. He shared his own journey, admitting that his path wasn't always clear, but that it was guided by a commitment to public service. Another key piece of advice was the pursuit of lifelong learning. He was a voracious reader and a perpetual student of the world, and he passionately advocated for this habit. In his view, a curious mind was a youthful mind, regardless of age. He encouraged his correspondents to read widely, to travel if they could, to learn new skills, and to always remain open to new ideas. For him, education wasn't something that ended with a diploma. It was a lifelong adventure. He also spoke eloquently about the importance of personal relationships. In a life filled with public accolades and political battles, he always came back to the value of family and true friendship. He advised his young readers to nurture their relationships, to be loyal, to forgive, and to cherish the people who support them. He knew that success without meaningful connections is hollow. His letters are a testament to the fact that his greatest treasures were not his public achievements, but the love and respect he shared with his inner circle. What makes this chapter so compelling is its authenticity. These weren't polished speeches for a crowd. They were intimate conversations frozen in time. You can feel his personality shining through his wit, his humility, and his deep-seated optimism. Even when discussing serious topics, there's a current of hope that runs through his writing. He had seen the best and worst of humanity, and yet he remained convinced that the future was bright, as long as the next generation was prepared to lead with wisdom and heart. As we read these letters, it feels like he's speaking directly to us. His advice to find your purpose, to never stop learning, to cherish your relationships, and to be an engaged citizen is as relevant today as it was 2 centuries ago. It's a powerful reminder that while the world changes, the fundamentals of a well-lived life remain constant. He wasn't just writing letters. He was planting seeds of wisdom, hoping they would grow and flourish in the generations to come. This chapter serves as a beautiful and inspiring conclusion to his life story. It shows us the man behind the legend, a mentor and guide who found his final and perhaps most important role in counseling the future. It's a legacy not of power or policy, but of wisdom, love, and an enduring faith in the promise of the next generation. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. I hope you found it as inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. I do love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What piece of advice resonated with you the most? Until next time, keep learning and stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we journey to the rolling hills of Virginia, to a place that was both a home and a sanctuary, a laboratory of ideas and a hub of intellectual exchange. We're stepping into Monticello, but not the Monticello of a president, but of a retired statesman, a scholar, a farmer, and a man of letters. Thomas Jefferson. After leaving the presidency in 1809, Jefferson finally returned to his beloved little mountain. He had longed for the tranquility of private life, a chance to escape the storms of politics, and dedicate himself to his passions. But retirement, for a man like Jefferson, was never going to be truly quiet. The world, it seemed, was not quite finished with him yet. Imagine the scene. The sun rises over the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting a warm glow on the iconic dome of Monticello. Inside, before the rest of the household is even stirring, the 66-year-old Jefferson is already at his desk. Not a grand, imposing desk, but a practical one, often a revolving chair paired with a polygraph. A fascinating device that allowed him to make a copy of every letter as he wrote it. And write. He did. The sheer volume of his correspondence is staggering. It's said that in some years, he wrote and received over 1,000 letters. This wasn't just casual chatter. These were detailed exchanges with scientists, philosophers, politicians, inventors, and ordinary citizens from across America and Europe. His study wasn't just a room. It was the nerve center of a transatlantic republic of letters. Who were these people writing to him? Everyone. Old political allies and rivals sought his counsel. Friends like James Madison and John Adams, with whom he famously reconciled in his later years, engaged in profound discussions about the nature of government, religion, and the legacy of their revolution. Young students, inspired by his ideals, wrote for advice. Farmers sent him new types of seeds, and inventors shared their latest contraptions, knowing they'd find an eager and knowledgeable audience in the sage of Monticello. But it wasn't just the famous and the intellectual who made the pilgrimage, either in person or by post. The doors of Monticello were famously open. Visitors arrived daily, sometimes by the dozen, often unannounced. They were a mix of dignitaries, old friends, and curious strangers, all wanting to meet the living legend, the author of the Declaration of Independence. This constant stream of visitors, while a testament to his fame, placed an immense strain on Jefferson and his household. His daughter Martha Jefferson Randolph, who managed the estate, often struggled to accommodate and feed the endless parade of guests. Jefferson, ever the gracious host, would entertain them, lead them on tours of his gardens and workshops, and engage in long, stimulating conversations that often lasted late into the night. Yet, he always returned to his desk. His letters from this period are a treasure trove. They reveal a mind still fiercely active, grappling with the great questions of his time and ours. He wrote passionately about education, convinced that the survival of the Republic depended on an informed citizenry. This conviction led to one of his last great public projects, the founding of the University of Virginia. He not only conceived of it but designed the curriculum, the architecture, and even served as its first rector. They called it the hobby of his old age, but it was a capstone to his lifelong belief in the power of knowledge. Through his letters, we see his scientific curiosity in full bloom. He meticulously recorded weather data, experimented with new crops, and exchanged ideas about botany, paleontology, and astronomy. He was a true product of the Enlightenment, believing that reason and inquiry could unlock the secrets of the universe and improve the human condition. But his correspondence also reveals the man behind the monument. We see his deep affection for his family, especially his grandchildren, for whom he designed educational games and shared in their daily lives. We see his financial worries, as the hospitality and maintenance of Monticello drove him deeper into debt. And we see his ongoing struggle with the profound contradiction of his life. The man who wrote that all men are created equal was also a lifelong enslaver. His writings show a man wrestling with the institution of slavery, acknowledging its injustice, yet unable or unwilling to dismantle the system that supported his existence. It's a complex and troubling part of his story, and his letters provide a direct, unfiltered window into that struggle. As the years passed, his hand grew less steady, his eyesight failed, but his mind remained sharp. He would often have his grandchildren read to him and write his replies. The flow of letters never truly stopped. It was as if he were trying to pour a lifetime of thought and experience onto the page, to preserve it for posterity. Jefferson referred to his study as his book box, a sanctuary filled with thousands of volumes. But in these final years, Monticello itself became a house of letters, a living library where ideas were not just stored on shelves but were constantly being created, debated, and shared. His correspondence was his final public service, a way of continuing to shape the nation he had helped to create, one thoughtful, handwritten page at a time. On July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years to the day after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson passed away at Monticello. In a remarkable twist of fate, his friend and rival, John Adams, died on the very same day. But through the thousands of letters he left behind, Jefferson's voice was far from silenced. He built his house on a mountain, but his true legacy was built on paper, an Inca house of letters that still stands today, inviting us all to read, to question, and to learn. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey to Monticello. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more stories from history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Can two people be the best of friends and the bitterest of rivals at the same time? It sounds like something out of a movie, but it is the true story of two of America's founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Their relationship is one of the most fascinating, complex, and ultimately moving stories in American history. It's a tale of revolution, politics, betrayal, and finally, reconciliation. Imagine this. Two brilliant minds, both architects of a new nation, fighting side by side for independence. That was Adams and Jefferson in the beginning. They were comrades, allies, and dear friends. Adams, the fiery lawyer from Massachusetts, and Jefferson, the thoughtful philosopher from Virginia. Together, they helped draft the Declaration of Independence and served as diplomats in Europe. Their bond forged in the crucible of revolution. They trusted each other, their families were close, and they shared a vision for a free America. But as is so often the case, politics got in the way. As the new United States began to take shape, their shared vision started to crack. They found themselves on opposite sides of the brand new political divide. Adams, a Federalist, believed in a strong, central government. Jefferson, a Democratic Republican, championed states' rights and feared a powerful federal authority. Their philosophical differences became intensely personal. Think about the political arguments you see today on social media, but imagine them playing out between two men who had literally built the country together. The arguments were fierce. When George Washington stepped down, the rivalry exploded. Adams was elected the second president, and by a razor-thin margin, Jefferson became his vice president. Can you imagine that today? The winner and the runner-up having to work together in the White House. The tension was unbelievable. The press at the time was brutal, with newspapers loyal to each side publishing vicious attacks. Friends accused friends of betrayal. The political climate was toxic, and their friendship was a major casualty. Adams felt Jefferson was undermining his presidency from within, while Jefferson believed Adams was betraying the very principles of the revolution. The election of 1800 was the breaking point. It was one of the nastiest campaigns in American history. Jefferson challenged the incumbent Adams, and the result was a bitter defeat for Adams. He was so devastated that he left Washington, D.C. in the dead of night, refusing to even attend Jefferson's inauguration. It was a complete and total rupture. For over a decade, these two giants of American history, these former best friends, didn't speak a single word to each other. The silence between them was as loud as their previous arguments. Two men who had shared so much were now completely estranged, separated by a wall of political bitterness and hurt feelings. But this isn't where their story ends. In fact, the most remarkable chapter was yet to come. After more than a decade of silence, a mutual friend, Dr. Benjamin Rush, another signer of the Declaration, decided he'd had enough. He believed the nation needed the wisdom of these two great men and that they needed to heal their fractured friendship. He wrote to both Adams and Jefferson, gently nudging them towards reconciliation. He urged them to put aside the past and reconnect. It was a long shot, but Rush was persistent. "I need to work here." On New Year's Day, 1812, John Adams sat down and wrote a short, simple letter to Thomas Jefferson. It was just a few lines, wishing him well. Jefferson received the letter and immediately wrote back a warm and lengthy reply. And just like that, the ice began to thaw. This kicked off one of the most incredible correspondences in history. For the next 14 years, until their deaths, they exchanged over 158 letters. These letters are a national treasure. They weren't just catching up on old times. They debated everything: philosophy, religion, history, their own legacies, and the future of the country they had created. They revisited their old arguments, but this time with the wisdom and perspective of old age. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, mutual respect. They were able to hash out their differences, explain their past actions, and finally, truly understand each other again. They talked about their grief, their families, and their fears for the nation. It was a reconciliation of two minds and two hearts. They argued about the role of the aristocracy, the nature of God, and the French Revolution. They shared their love of books and farming. Adams, ever the pessimist, would often challenge Jefferson's optimistic view of human nature. Jefferson, in turn, would gently counter with his unwavering faith in the people. Through these letters, they rebuilt their friendship, piece by piece, finding common ground and learning to respect their enduring differences. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the enduring strength of their original bond. They were, as Adams wrote, two pieces of wood taut had been, cast on the same wave. And now, for the final, unbelievable twist in their story. On July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary, to the day of the Declaration of Independence, both men died. John Adams passed away in Massachusetts. His last words, spoken without knowing his friend was also fading, were reportedly, "Thomas Jefferson survives." But he was wrong. Jefferson had died just a few hours earlier at his home, Monticello, in Virginia. It was as if destiny itself had written the final chapter of their incredible story. Two lives, intertwined from the very beginning of the nation, ending on the exact same historic day. The story of Jefferson and Adams is more than just a history lesson. It's a profoundly human story about friendship, ambition, and the power of reconciliation. It reminds us that even the deepest wounds can be healed and that it is never too late to reach out to an old friend. It shows that we can disagree fiercely on important issues, but still maintain respect and even love for one another. In our own polarized times, their story feels more relevant than ever. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this incredible friendship? Until next time, welcome back to our journey through the life of Thomas Jefferson. Today, we're diving into Chapter 15. The flow of ideas. If you thought Jefferson was just a politician locked away in a stuffy office, Think again. He was the hub of a vast, intellectual network, a true nexus of innovation that was shaping the future of America. Imagine his study at Monticello, not as a quiet retreat, but as a bustling command center, with letters flying in and out, carrying seeds of revolution in science, exploration, and education. Jefferson was more than just a consumer of ideas. He was a catalyst, a connector who thrived on the exchange of knowledge. His correspondents were a who's who of the era's greatest minds. He exchanged detailed letters with inventors, dissecting new gadgets and agricultural techniques. He debated philosophy with educators, dreaming up a new kind of university that would be free from religious dogma and idea, that would later become the University of Virginia. He was a polymath who saw no boundaries between disciplines. To him, improving a plow was just as vital to the nation's health as drafting a law. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a core part of his vision for a thriving, enlightened republic. He believed that a nation's strength was directly tied to the intelligence and ingenuity of its citizens. So, how did this flow of ideas work in practice? It was all about communication. Jefferson's quill was rarely dry. He would write to agricultural societies in Europe, requesting samples of Italian rice or French olive trees, convinced they could be adapted to American soil. When an inventor like Eli Whitney developed the cotton gin, Jefferson wasn't just interested in the machine itself. He was fascinated by the principles of mass production and interchangeable parts. He understood that these innovations weren't just about efficiency. They were about empowering the common farmer and artisan, the very backbone of his ideal agrarian society. He was a relentless questioner, always probing, always asking what if, and how can we make this better? This intellectual curiosity wasn't just confined to gadgets and crops. Jefferson was obsessed with the natural world. He corresponded with naturalists, collecting data on everything from weather patterns to the bones of a mastodon unearthed in New York. He saw America as a vast, open-air laboratory, full of secrets waiting to be discovered. He believed that understanding the continent's geography, its flora, and its fauna was essential to claiming it, not just politically, but intellectually. Every new plant specimen, every fossil, every meteorological report was a piece of a grand puzzle. He was trying to assemble a complete picture of the American continent. This brings us to one of the most famous examples of Jefferson's role as a master of information, the Lewis and Clark expedition. By 1803, with the Louisiana Purchase doubling the size of the United States overnight, Jefferson knew that this vast, unknown territory needed to be explored. But this wasn't going to be a simple treasure hunt. It was to be a scientific, commercial, and diplomatic mission of unprecedented scale. And to lead it, he chose his young, trusted aide, Captain Meriwether Lewis. Jefferson didn't just give Lewis a map and wish him luck. He personally curated a crash course for him, a bespoke education for the explorer of the century. Imagine being Meriwether Lewis in the months leading up to the expedition. You're not just getting marching orders. You're getting a full-blown Jeffersonian education. Jefferson sent him to Philadelphia, the nation's scientific capital at the time. There, Lewis met with the country's top experts. He studied botany with Benjamin Smith Barton, learning how to identify, collect, and preserve plant specimens. He learned how to calculate latitude and longitude from the stars with astronomer Andrew Ellicott, a crucial skill for mapping the unknown wilderness. He even met with Dr. Benjamin Rush, who equipped him with medical knowledge and a formidable medicine kit, preparing him for the health challenges the Corps would undoubtedly face. Jefferson's instructions to Lewis were incredibly detailed, a testament to his comprehensive vision. He didn't just say, "Go west." He tasked Lewis with observing the soil, the climate, the animals, and the plants. He wanted him to document the native tribes, their languages, their customs, their potential as trading partners. He was to search for a water route to the Pacific, the fabled Northwest Passage, which was key to unlocking transcontinental trade. This wasn't just exploration for exploration's sake. It was a mission of national importance, designed to gather the strategic intelligence America needed to expand and prosper. The letters between Jefferson and Lewis are fascinating. They reveal a relationship that was par commanderand officer, par mentorande protosh. Jefferson poured his own vast knowledge into Lewis, sharing his theories about the continent's geography and its potential. He was essentially programming Lewis with his own intellectual curiosity. Think of Jefferson as the mission planner, the architect of the entire endeavor, who understood that the success of the expedition depended not just on courage and endurance, but on knowledge, observation, and meticulous documentation. He was sending a team of scientists in soldiers' uniforms. When Lewis and Clark finally returned in 1806, they brought back more than just stories of adventure. They brought back a treasure trove of information that would shape America's westward expansion for decades. They brought maps that redrew the continent, journals filled with scientific observations, and crates of botanical and zoological specimens that were sent straight to Jefferson. For Jefferson, this was the ultimate payoff. The flow of ideas had gone out into the wilderness and returned 100-fold, bringing with it a new understanding of the American continent and its boundless possibilities. In essence, Chapter 15 shows us Jefferson, the intellectual in chief. His presidency wasn't just about politics. It was about orchestrating a grand exchange of knowledge that he believed was essential for the survival and success of the young nation. Whether he was corresponding with an inventor about a new plow, an educator about a new university, or an explorer about a new frontier, Jefferson was always at the center, connecting people and pushing the boundaries of what was known. The flow of ideas was the lifeblood of his vision for America. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Jefferson's world. If you enjoyed this exploration, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the life of one of America's most fascinating figures. Today, we're stepping into the twilight years of Thomas Jefferson, a time when the man who penned the Declaration of Independence faced a new, intensely personal challenge. The burden of writing. As the years advanced, a tremor began to take hold of Jefferson's hands, particularly his right wrist, the very hand that had drafted a nation's creed. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a profound trial for a man whose life was built upon the written word. He had once famously declared, "I cannot live without books," and one could easily add, "nor without my pen." Writing was his tool, his confidant, and his primary means of shaping the world. Imagine the frustration. The mind, still sharp and brimming with ideas, opinions, and affection, was tethered to a body that increasingly refused to obey. The elegant, flowing script that characterized his earlier correspondence began to show the strain. Lines wavered, letters became less distinct. Each word required immense concentration and physical effort. Yet, did he stop? Absolutely not. If anything, his determination only grew stronger. This period of his life reveals a remarkable testament to his resilience. Instead of surrendering to his physical limitations, Jefferson adapted. He experimented with different writing implements, searching for one that might offer more stability. He began to rely more on his left hand, teaching himself to write with it out of sheer necessity. The script was different, more labored, but the voice was unmistakably his. His correspondence during these later years is a poignant chronicle of this struggle. In letters to friends like John Adams and James Madison, you can almost feel the effort behind each sentence. He would often apologize for his scrawl, explaining that his shaky hand made writing a painful operation. But the content of these letters remained as vibrant as ever. He debated philosophy, discussed politics, managed his estate, and shared intimate family news. The medium was faltering, but the message was as powerful as ever. This wasn't just about personal communication. Jefferson felt a profound sense of duty to history and to the future of the republic he had helped create. He was acutely aware that his letters were not just private notes, but historical documents. He was writing for posterity, ensuring that his thoughts, his rationale, and his vision for America were preserved. The physical pain of writing was a price he was willing to pay for this legacy. His letters became his voice in a very literal sense. As age and infirmity made travel and public speaking difficult, the mail became his primary forum. From his sanctuary at Monticello, he engaged in a lively dialogue with the world. He advised presidents, mentored young scholars, and reconnected with old friends, all through the arduous process of putting pen to paper. His study, filled with books and correspondence, was the true center of his world, a hub from which his influence continued to radiate. Consider the sheer volume of his writing. Even with trembling hands, Jefferson produced thousands of letters in his final decades. This wasn't just a habit, it was a discipline, a daily ritual that connected him to the world and to himself. It was a way of ordering his thoughts, of wrestling with complex ideas, and of maintaining the intellectual rigor that had defined his entire life. In a way, this struggle humanizes Jefferson more than any political victory or intellectual triumph. We see him not as a marble statue, but as a man of flesh and blood, grappling with the universal experience of aging. His perseverance is a powerful lesson. It teaches us that our voice doesn't have to be loud to be heard, and that physical weakness cannot extinguish the fire of a determined spirit. The image of an elderly Jefferson, sitting at his desk, his hand shaking as he carefully forms each letter, is incredibly moving. It's a portrait of quiet courage. He wasn't leading an army or debating in Congress, but in his own way, he was fighting a battle every single day. A battle against time, against his own body, for the sake of connection, for the sake of history, and for the sake of his enduring belief in the power of ideas. His later writings are a treasure. They offer a unique window into the mind of a founder reflecting on a lifetime of revolutionary change. He revisited old debates, defended his actions, and offered wisdom gleaned from decades of experience. He was settling his intellectual accounts, ensuring that the story of the American experiment, as he saw it, would be told. The burden of writing, therefore, was also its blessing. The very difficulty of the act seemed to distill his thoughts, making each word he managed to write even more precious. He chose his words with care, not just for clarity, but perhaps because he knew how much effort each one cost him. His letters from this era are a masterclass in concise, purposeful communication. As we conclude this chapter, let's reflect on what this tells us. It shows that our impact isn't defined by the ease with which we do things, but by our commitment to doing them despite the obstacles. Jefferson's trembling hand couldn't silence his powerful mind. His letters, scratched out with immense difficulty, became his final, defiant act of creation. A legacy of resilience that speaks to us as powerfully as the Declaration of Independence itself. The burden of writing was his final contribution, a testament to a life dedicated to the word. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a lesser-known aspect of Thomas Jefferson's life. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more stories from history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next video. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the life and mind of Thomas Jefferson. In this chapter, we step away from the grand stage of politics and enter the quiet solitude of his study at Monticello. Here, in his later years, through a vast collection of personal letters, Jefferson revisited the very ideals he had so eloquently penned into the Declaration of Independence decades earlier. This wasn't the young, fiery revolutionary anymore. This was a man looking back, a philosopher king without a crown, reflecting on the grand experiment he helped launch, American democracy. Imagine Jefferson, surrounded by his books, the Virginia hills stretching out before him. The ink flows from his quill, not for laws or treaties, but for friends and fellow thinkers like John Adams, James Madison, and the Marquis de Lafayette. These letters are a treasure trove, a window into his evolving thoughts on liberty, governance, and the future of the nation he so dearly loved. He wasn't just reminiscing. He was wrestling with the enduring questions of freedom. Had the Republic strayed from its founding principles? Was the flame of liberty still burning brightly? One of the most powerful themes that emerges from these later writings is his unwavering faith in the common person and the importance of education. Jefferson believed that a self-governing republic could only survive if its citizens were enlightened. He famously wrote, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be." For him, liberty wasn't a gift to be passively received. It was a responsibility that required constant vigilance and an educated populace capable of making informed decisions. This conviction was the driving force behind his single greatest passion project in retirement, the founding of the University of Virginia. He saw it as the ultimate safeguard for the future of American democracy, a place where future generations would learn the rights and duties of self. In his correspondence with John Adams, his former rival turned cherished friend, we see a fascinating dialogue unfold. They debated everything from the nature of aristocracy to the role of religion in society. Jefferson argued against what he called an artificial aristocracy based on wealth and birth. Instead, he championed a natural aristocracy of virtue and talent, which could be drawn from any rank of society. He believed that a true republic must create pathways for the most capable individuals to rise and lead, regardless of their background. This wasn't about creating a new elite. It was about ensuring the government was in the hands of the most competent and virtuous citizens, chosen by the people themselves. However, Jefferson's reflections were not without their shadows and complexities. He was acutely aware of the deep contradictions within the nation, and indeed, within his own life, most notably the institution of slavery. In his letters, he repeatedly referred to slavery as a moral depravity and a fatal stain upon the country. He expressed a deep sense of foreboding, once describing the issue as a fire bell in the night that filled him with terror for the future of the Union. He understood that holding one group of people in bondage was fundamentally incompatible with the principle that all men are created equal. Yet, despite his private condemnations, he remained trapped by the economic and social systems of his time, never finding a practical path to widespread emancipation during his lifetime. These letters reveal a man deeply troubled by this hypocrisy, a founding father who saw the storm clouds of civil war gathering on the horizon, born from the nation's original sin. As he got older, Jefferson also grew more concerned about the potential for government overreach and the consolidation of power, particularly in the federal judiciary. He worried that the courts, being appointed for life, could become a despotic branch, slowly undermining the will of the people and the sovereignty of the states. He was a staunch advocate for states' rights, not as a means to protect slavery as it would later be used, but as a crucial check on the power of a centralized government. Ambition da wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement. For Jefferson, the best government was the one that governed least, allowing individual liberty to flourish. He also pondered the very nature of progress and the ability of each generation to shape its own destiny. In a famous letter, he declared that the earth belongs, in usufruct, to the living, meaning that one generation cannot bind future generations with its laws or its debts. He believed that constitutions and laws should be revisited and refreshed every 19 years or so to reflect the will of the current population. This was a radical idea, suggesting that democracy should be a continuous, dynamic process, not a static set of rules frozen in time. It was a profound expression of his trust in the future and his belief that each generation had the right and the wisdom to govern itself. What we see in these final reflections is a man whose core beliefs remained remarkably consistent, yet were tempered and deepened by a lifetime of experience. The fire of revolution had cooled into the steady, warm glow of philosophical contemplation. He was no longer just a politician, but a teacher, urging his countrymen and future generations to cherish their freedoms, to pursue knowledge, and to remain ever vigilant against the creep of tyranny. His letters from Monticello are not just historical documents. They are a continuing conversation about the meaning of America. They remind us that the ideals of the Declaration are not relics of the past, but living principles that each generation must re-examine, reinterpret, and fight for. Jefferson's legacy is complex and far from perfect, but his late-life reflections on liberty offer a timeless and essential challenge to us all to actively participate in the messy, glorious, and ongoing project of democracy. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. If you found this exploration of Jefferson's later thoughts as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're journeying to the final moments of a titan of American history, Thomas Jefferson. We're in the year 1826. The 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is fast approaching, and at his beloved Monticello, an 83-year-old Jefferson is penning his last letters. What do these final words reveal about the man who helped shape a nation? Let's find out. Even as his health failed, Jefferson's mind remained as sharp and engaged as ever. His correspondence during these final months is a treasure trove, revealing a man still deeply invested in the world he was preparing to leave. He wasn't just settling his affairs. He was solidifying his legacy, not through grand pronouncements, but through thoughtful, personal exchanges that touched on everything from science and education to family and the future of the republic he had One of the most poignant themes in these last letters is his unwavering commitment to education. His final great project, the University of Virginia, was his pride and joy. He called it the hobby of his old age. In letters to his friend and future president, James Madison, who was the rector of the university, Jefferson meticulously discussed curriculum, faculty appointments, and even the architectural details of the campus. He envisioned a new kind of university, one free from religious dogma, where students could pursue knowledge for its own sake. He believed that an educated citizenry was the only true safeguard of liberty. Even on his deathbed, he was a teacher, an architect of enlightenment, ensuring the foundations of his academical village were secure for generations to come. He was looking far beyond his own lifetime, planting seeds for a future he would never see. But his letters weren't all grand philosophy. They were also deeply personal. He wrote to his grandchildren with immense affection, offering advice and expressing his love. To his granddaughter, Ellen Randolph Coolidge, living in Boston, he wrote with a mix of grandfatherly tenderness and intellectual respect. He shared news from Monticello, discussed books they were both reading, and lamented the distance that separated them. These letters strip away the marble statue image of Jefferson and show us a warm, loving family man, grappling with the universal human experiences of aging and saying goodbye. He fretted over his debts, a burden that weighed heavily on him, and his primary concern was for the welfare of his daughter, Martha, and her children. He wanted to ensure they would not be left destitute after his passing. This vulnerability makes him profoundly relatable. Perhaps the most famous of his last writings is his response to an invitation to attend the 50th anniversary celebration of the Declaration of Independence in Washington, D.C. His health was far too fragile to make the journey. But his reply, dated June 24th, 1826, has become one of the most powerful and eloquent expressions of the American ideal ever written. It is, in essence, his final, public testament. In this letter to Roger C. Waitman, he expresses his regret at being unable to attend, but then pivots to the true meaning of the day. He writes that the Declaration was more than just an act of separation. It was a beacon, a signal to the world. He hoped it would inspire others to burst the chains under which monkish ignorance and superstition had persuaded them to bind themselves and to assume the blessings and security of self-government. He saw the American Revolution not as a singular event, but as the dawn of a new era for all of humanity. He famously concluded, "May it be, to the world, what I believe it will be, the signal of arousing men to burst the chains, and to assume the blessings and security of self-government. The general spread of the light of science is already laid open to every view, the palpable truth that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred ready to ride them legitimately by the grace of God." What powerful imagery, saddles on their backs. It's a radical assertion of human equality and the right to self. Just 10 days before his death, with his strength fading, Jefferson could still summon this incredible fire and clarity. He wasn't looking back with simple nostalgia. He was looking forward with unwavering hope. He saw America's founding as a catalyst for global liberty. This final letter encapsulates the core of Jefferson's lifelong philosophy, his faith in reason, his belief in progress, and his profound hope for the future of the Republic. He acknowledged the imperfections and the struggles, but his ultimate vision was one of optimism. He believed that as long as the principles of liberty and self-governance were cherished and defended, the American experiment would succeed and inspire the world. And then, in a twist of fate that seems almost scripted by destiny, Thomas Jefferson passed away on July 4th, 1826. The very same day, 50 years to the hour after the Declaration of Independence was adopted, and hundreds of miles away in Massachusetts. His old friend, rival, and fellow founder, John Adams, also passed away. Adams's reported last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He was wrong about Jefferson's survival in the literal sense, but in a much deeper way, he was absolutely right. Through these final, thoughtful, and humble letters, Jefferson does survive. He lives on not as a flawless icon, but as a complex, brilliant, and deeply human individual who, until his very last breath, held fast to the belief in the power of an enlightened public and the enduring promise of liberty. His final correspondence is not an ending, but a continuation of the conversation. He started a lifetime before a conversation about freedom, knowledge, and the endless pursuit of a more perfect union. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Jefferson's final days. His words remind us that the work of democracy is never truly finished. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. We'll see you in the next video. Ever wonder if a simple letter could change the world? What if you wrote not just one, but over 19,000 of them? Imagine a life so full of ideas, so driven by curiosity and a desire for change, that the ink from your pen would flow for decades, creating a river of words that would outlive you by centuries. This isn't fiction. It's the story of ink that literally wrote a nation into existence. Welcome, history lovers and curious minds, to a journey back in time. Today, we're diving into a treasure trove of thoughts, a collection of letters that forms one of the most remarkable personal archives in history. We're talking about a legacy of correspondence that covers everything from the grand ideals of philosophy and the nitty-gritty of politics to the beauty of art and the breakthroughs of science. These weren't just simple "how are you" notes. They were debates, blueprints, confessions, and discoveries, all captured on paper. Think about it. 19,000 letters. To put that in perspective, if you wrote one letter every single day, it would take you more than 52 years to reach that number. This colossal collection gives us more than just facts and dates. It offers a deeply personal and unfiltered window into the mind of a founder and the very soul of early America. Through these pages, we can trace the evolution of revolutionary ideas, feel the anxieties of a nation at war, and witness the intellectual sparks that would ignite a new world. Each letter is a time capsule. The curve of a letter, the choice of a word, the slight blot of ink, they all tell a story. His handwriting itself becomes a character in this saga. We see the hurried scrawl of a man racing against time to share an urgent political strategy, and the more deliberate, elegant script of a philosopher pondering the nature of human happiness. We can almost feel the texture of the paper, smell the aging ink, and hear the scratch of the quill as it moves across the page, capturing a fleeting thought that would go on to shape a continent. These letters weren't just sent to presidents and kings. They were sent to scientists, farmers, artists, and family members. This network of correspondence created an invisible web that connected the brightest minds of the age. An idea about agriculture might be shared with a farmer in Virginia, a scientific observation sent to a peer in Paris, and a political theory debated with a colleague in Philadelphia. It was the 18th century version of the internet, an analog social network where ideas were the currency and progress was the goal. Through this ink, we can explore his multifaceted genius. One day, he's dissecting the latest astronomical discovery. The next, he's designing a new kind of plow. He might write a letter arguing for religious freedom in the morning, and another in the afternoon detailing the perfect way to store wine. This wasn't a man who stayed in one lane. He was endlessly curious, a true Renaissance man whose interests knew no bounds, and his letters are the proof. They reveal a mind constantly at work, always questioning, always learning, always striving to improve the world around him. The very act of preserving these letters is a story in itself. Imagine the effort it took for his family, and later for historians and archivists, to gather, organize, and protect these fragile pieces of paper from the ravages of time. Many could have been lost to fire, water, or simply neglect, but they survived. This incredible act of preservation ensures that his voice was not silenced by death. His ink, his thoughts, and his spirit continue to speak to us today. So what can we learn from this river of ink? We learn that ideas, when shared, have the power to topple empires and build nations. We learn that a life of continuous learning and curiosity is a life well, and we learn that the words we leave behind can become our most enduring monument. These letters are not just historical artifacts. They are a conversation across centuries, a dialogue between the past and the present. They challenge us to think critically about our own world. The debates over liberty, governance, and human rights that fill these pages are as relevant today as they were over 200 years ago. By reading his words, we are invited to join the conversation, to reflect on the foundations of our own society, and to consider the legacy we ourselves will leave behind. What will our letters, our emails, our texts, our digital footprints say about us? In a world of fleeting digital messages, there's something profoundly powerful about the permanence of ink on paper. It represents a commitment to an idea, to a relationship. His 19,000 letters are a testament to that commitment. They are the ink that outlived the author, ensuring that his extraordinary mind would continue to inspire, challenge, and enlighten generations yet to come. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most lasting things we can build are not made of stone or steel, but of simple words. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through history. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments what historical figures, letters you'd love to read. Until next time, keep exploring. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We've reached the final chapter of our journey through the life and mind of Thomas Jefferson, seen through the lens of his incredible correspondence. We've called this chapter The Eternal Conversation, and I think you'll soon see why. Over the past few weeks, we've explored Jefferson, the statesman, the scientist, the farmer, the father, and the friend. We've seen his revolutionary ideas take shape, witnessed his personal joys and private sorrows, and debated his complex and often contradictory legacy. But how do we know all of this? How can we feel so connected to a man who lived over 2 centuries ago? The answer, as we've discovered together, lies in his letters. Jefferson's letters were never just ink on paper. They were more than simple updates or political treatises. They were living, breathing extensions of his mind. Think about it. 11W, the letters of a person, especially of one whose business has been chiefly transacted by letters, form the only full and genuine journal of his life. He knew, even as he was writing, that he was creating a record not just for his correspondence, but for posterity, for us. Each letter was a deliberate act of connection. When he wrote to John Adams, his rival and friend, he wasn't just debating politics. He was building a bridge across a deep political divide, trying to preserve a friendship and a shared revolutionary history. These letters, exchanged in their twilight years, are a masterclass in intellectual sparring, mutual respect, and eventual reconciliation. They show us that even the deepest disagreements can be navigated with reason and a genuine desire for understanding. They are a conversation that continues to teach us about civil discourse today. When he wrote to his daughters, Martha and Maria, his letters were bridges of love and guidance across the vast and often lonely distances of the 18th century. He filled them with advice on everything from reading lists to personal conduct, his words a constant presence in their lives. Through these letters, we see a father desperate to stay connected, to shape and protect his children from afar. It has a profoundly human and relatable side of a man often seen only as a monumental figure. And what about his letters to explorers, like Lewis and Clark? They were bridges into the unknown. Jefferson's instructions were a roadmap of curiosity, a detailed plan for understanding a continent. He wasn't just seeking territory, he was seeking knowledge. He wanted to know about the plants, the animals, the geography, and the native peoples. His letters propelled the cores of discovery forward, his intellectual curiosity acting as their compass. They connected the settled East with the untamed West, not just with maps, but with ideas. This is the core of what we're talking about today. Jefferson's letters were bridges. They were bridges across time, allowing us, here in the 21st century, to listen in on the foundational debates of the United States. We can trace the evolution of his thoughts on liberty, governance, and human rights, seeing the raw, unfiltered process of a great mind at work. We feel the urgency of the revolutionary moment and the challenges of building a new nation, not as a dry history lesson, but as a lived experience. They were also bridges across minds. Jefferson corresponded with the leading thinkers of his age, from Europe to America. He created a network of intellect, an epistolary republic, as some historians call it. Ideas about science, philosophy, agriculture, and architecture flowed freely through his mail. He would receive a new scientific discovery from a friend in Paris and immediately share it with a colleague in Philadelphia. He was a connector, a hub of the Enlightenment, using his pen to weave a vast web of shared knowledge. This network demonstrates his belief that progress is a collaborative effort, that no single mind has all the answers. And perhaps most importantly, his letters are a bridge from one generation's thoughts to the next. This is the eternal conversation. Jefferson was acutely aware that the American experiment was just that, an experiment. He believed that each generation had the right and the responsibility to question, to challenge, and to remake the world for itself. He famously wrote, "The earth belongs in usufruct to the living," meaning that each generation has the use of the earth during its lifetime, but must pass it on intact to the next. His letters embody this principle. He wasn't just dictating truths. He was starting a conversation. He laid out his reasoning, his hopes, and his fears, and in doing so, he invited us to engage with them. He knew the work of liberty was never finished. He left us his words as a starting point, a foundation upon which to build. When we read his letters and debate his ideas, soaring rhetoric on freedom alongside his deeply troubling ownership of enslaved people, we are participating in the very conversation he started. We are the next link in the chain. Think of it like this. A great monument stands as a fixed point in time, something to be admired from a distance. But a bridge is functional. It's meant to be used. It connects to points, enabling movement, traffic, and communication. Jefferson's letters are not a monument to be placed on a pedestal. They are a bridge, inviting us to walk across, to engage with the past, and to carry its lessons into the future. They ask us to think, to argue, to be inspired, and to be critical. As we close this series, my hope is that you no longer see Jefferson's letters as dusty old documents. I hope you see them for what they are. Powerful tools for understanding our world and ourselves. They are a testament to the enduring power of the written word to connect us, to challenge us, and to keep the conversation of democracy alive. Jefferson, the man, is gone, but the conversation he started through his correspondence is eternal. And now, we are all a part of it. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. It has been a privilege to explore this history with all of you. If you've enjoyed this series, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. Your support makes all of this possible. Let me know in the comments what you found most fascinating about Jefferson's letters, or what historical topic you'd like us to tackle next. Until then, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching.